Hello and welcome, my art-loving friends. Today we have two new to me products that we're going to try out together. So we're going to kill two birds with one stone here. Because I have been dying to try this coloring book out. This is a coloring book by Sarah Simon, TheMintGardener, and it claims that it's on premium watercolor paper, and they're beginner-friendly projects. There are 25 of them. So I thought this would be really fun to try something from this book with the new 5th generation Paul Rubens watercolors. Now I just put out a video a couple weeks ago on their 4th generation. And I had some issues with their indigo, although it was a beautiful hue, it wasn't quite as deep and dark as it needed to be. And then a couple of the comments said they felt that the Prussian blue was a little off as well. And I did email my contact at Paul Rubens, and she said instead of kind of investigating what was going on, they actually just stopped the 4th generation line of paints and are only promoting the 5th generation now. So it comes with this nice cloth. And the funny thing is I almost bought this set for myself just for the 10 because it comes either in this or one that's a darker colored zebra striped. I guess this is zebra striped. I don't know what you want to call it, but it's quite pretty. Reason set in, and I did not buy it just for the 10. However, when Paul Rubens offered to send it to me, I was ecstatic. So it has kind of a unique selection of paints as far as the beginning goes because it starts with a Naples yellow instead of a white, which is kind of neat, but it does include a black. So this one also has an indigo, so we'll get to make sure that it is correct. And I have seen other reviews of this set, and it looks like the indigo is just fine. You can see in this set, everything's individually wrapped. It has pigment information and light fast information, and some of them are loose enough you can just push them right out. However, nothing is marked on the pans, so you will need to mark them if you want to keep track of the pigment information on the pans themselves. It is kind of nice that you can just push them out, at least most of them. It's not going to take forever to open these like it does on some of them, which is kind of fun for like the first one or two, and then you're just like, okay, I wish these were all open. So I'll open these all and mark the pans so that I don't get confused later because I do want to add these to my pigment database, and then we'll get to painting. I went ahead and did a swatch sheet of the colors in this set. They are beautiful, and the indigo is fully dark like it's supposed to be, which is awesome. The Perylene Maroon's a little bit different than some Perylene Maroons I'm used to, but it is a beautiful hue. And here is the Venetian Red. Looks like I didn't get as much pigment on that one. I kept having a lot of water in the brush, but that's because I was using a brush I wasn't very familiar with. This one, Cobalt Green Dark, I think that was. Nope, Cobalt Turquoise Dark. Lovely color. So some unusual color choices for this palette, but that's part of the joy in it, is that you'll get some new colors that you don't have in their previous generations. Before we just start painting, I want to show you a little bit about this book. She has several in the series. This happens to be workbook 2 because it's the one I was most interested in. And the whole beginning is instructions on how to watercolor, what supplies you're going to need, the techniques, and then it has tons of practice. Right here, you're starting on page 30. Flip to page 30 and do this. And that way you can learn about your colors and how to apply them to the paper and so on. And you get to practice other techniques and go to a certain page to do that. Page 31. Wet on dry, go to page 31. It's just on and on. All this practice that you get to do. It's pretty neat. And she teaches you about things that I don't often see in some other books. I haven't gone through a ton of watercolor books, but just the coloring books, I guess this has a lot of information on the how-to, and that is pretty neat. I'm going to go ahead and read through it in a lot more detail later. So here's kind of fun one. That's Perylene Maroon, and that is pretty accurate to the hue I would expect it to be. And here's the Perylene Maroon from Paul Rubens, so they are quite a bit different. Still pretty though. Burnt sienna. We don't really have an alizarin crimson, but this one would probably stand in for that. One of these. The yellow ochre, we could either do the Naples yellow or the actual yellow ochre, but they call it earth yellow here in Paul Rubens. We do have a lemon yellow. She has chromium green there, oxide of chromium. We don't have that color, but we could probably make it by mixing these two together. We don't have a cobalt blue, not in this set. I mean, I have other sets that we could use. I don't have a Perylene Violet, but I do have Violet Iron Oxide and maybe a Perylene Violet in a different brand. But anyway, it's kind of fun to see. There are ways to mix these colors too. She actually had a little mixing chart here to get some other colors and how you might mix them using some colors here. So that's kind of neat. The painting that I'm interested in trying out is this one here, just because it has a lot of open space and I think we'll be able to see how the colors work on this paper. Now there are a lot of instructions that you could follow step by step. And look at how many different colors she uses. That's a little overwhelming, but I'm just going to use the colors in the set. I'm going to ignore the instructions for now. Use the picture right here maybe as an example and just paint this how I want to paint it. And I will try these Meeden brushes again. I did notice when Tori and I finished our raspberry paintings the other day, these brushes act a little differently than the Princeton Aqua Elite brushes that I'm used to. So it took a little bit of a learning curve to get used to them. I don't know, they just use water a little bit differently than the Princeton Aqua Elite. And it's not good, it's not bad, it just is a fact. Every different brush you use will have a different feel to it, and you have to get used to that. And these are very lightweight brushes as far as the feel of them. They are not hefty at all. So if you like a brush that feels hefty in your hand, these aren't it. They are nice and lightweight. So I'm going to wet this first so we can play with some color dispersion and have some soft edges. So it's taking water nicely. And then I think the Venetian red is going to be the perfect color for this pot. Let's see how it disperses. Wow! That's amazing. Jeez. Pretty neat. Get over on this edge. Very cool. I'm going to grab a little more pigment, really darken the side. May have to wait for it to dry to do another layer and get it exactly like I want, but we'll see. Wow, there is a lot of pigment here. That's pretty impressive. I do not have the straightest edge going over there. See if I can get a straight edge. This is where I tell you, you should have waited to drink your coffee until after you were done painting. I'm gonna just wipe some of that off the brush. I didn't dip it in water or anything, just wiped it off the brush on a rag. Kind of spread this out, and then I'll put a little bit of color down this side and maybe up here. And I think I'll leave that as it is. Let me get a little bit of color around the rim. So that's filled in since I got some water into it. Needs to look right. This is a pretty big brush getting into a teeny tiny area. So you can see how well that's working. Very well. Except for my shaky hands. So she recommends using a round 1 and a round 4 for this project. This is probably equivalent to a 10. So, did I listen to instructions? No. So this has a weird bloom happening. It's like where I put extra pigment, dried the paper out really quickly. I noticed that right when I put it on, but I thought I had pulled water into it to make it more even, but I think it's not quite the effect I want. I mean, it could look really cool. These pots aren't perfect, but I think I will just take this and spread it back up at least to the rim and maybe get a little bit more even line going there. With the weird drying stage, it's creating some blooms, but as long as I'm intentional about it, it's okay. I'd like to do another big space, which would be his hat, which I think we should use the Perylene Maroon for, because why not? I don't have my swatch sheet labeled. Okay, I thought it was this one. I was gonna say, which one is it? I'd better get that swatch sheet labeled because it's not fun to have to guess your colors. Okay. Oh, I should have watered the hat first. That's okay. We can try what the paper is like on dry. Feels fine. She says premium watercolor paper, but I don't think it's cotton or anything. But it seems okay. Like I'm not upset or having trouble painting on it yet. And that was a pretty big wash. We had that paper dry on us when I put that extra pigment on that edge, but some papers, I mean, even your good paper can do that when you are adding a bunch of pigment without a bunch of water. It can dry it out. That's fun. We can do his pants indigo and play with the indigo that's in this set. I think that's a good idea. What a beautiful color. Indigo is one of my most absolute favorite paint colors. The tip you can get on this brush is just great. Look at the dispersion this paint has. It almost reminds me of Rosa Gallery or Core. From this point on, I knew that the greenery would take a while, so I have sped that up, and I will just tell you a little bit more about this book by Sarah Simons because it's pretty interesting. It does say on the back of the book that it is wood-free watercolor paper, luxurious and crisp white. This paper withstands watercolor paints and ink, so there is no bleed through. Plus, the author designed all her artwork on the same paper to ensure your final pieces are just as bright and beautiful as her examples. And you can see that in the greenery, it does look quite bright and beautiful. So there are 25 projects. This is 200 GSM watercolor paper. No bleed through again, it says again. It has tigers, peacocks, sunflowers, koi fish, succulents, and more in this book. There are many of these books, as I mentioned in the beginning, and I really think this is fun. I think she did a great job, and I am excited to have the book in my collection, and I'll bring it on trips with me, and I probably will put some of her other books maybe on my wish list in Amazon, see if the family might want to get it for me for birthday or Christmas later, because I don't need it. I have a lot of Dana Fox's coloring books. I have one of Christy Rice's, and I can tell you the paper in her book is more for markers than watercolor. So this book is a huge improvement over that. That's for sure. Her books are kind of fun, but I like this paper way better. I actually feel like you can paint on this. And the fun part is the instructions are also on watercolor paper. So you could take the examples of the greenery in this watercolor painting, for example, and you could paint a border around the other pages, like the instruction sheet page with greenery, vines, flowers. I mean, you could use both sides to just doodle with watercolors, and I think that's a really fun thing to be able to do. I would say offhand that this paper is probably a little bit better than the paper in the Dana Fox books, although the Dana Fox books are pretty decent cellulose paper. This one says wood-free, so I find that interesting. It doesn't say exactly what it is made out of, but it is interesting to use. I'll compare it to Arches later in this video so you can kind of see how that works, and I'll give you some thoughts on that. But I would say with the amount of instruction given in this book and all of the projects, anyone could have fun with this. I am an advanced watercolor artist at this point, and I still really enjoy books like this. And if you're a beginner, she has so many wonderful instructions in the beginning of this that you would easily be able to, well, I think easily, it's hard to say since I'm not at the beginner level, but I really do think all the instructions she gives in the beginning are so comprehensive. They're including great pictures to go along with the instructions, and she gives the capitalization for the terms that she uses throughout the book for her instruction set. So I think it's going to be really easy to follow for anyone who's interested in watercolor and hasn't even touched it maybe for the first time. As far as the Paul Rubens paint, this is a really fun selection of paints. I love the colors that they put in this paint set. It just makes it really unique. Plus you can mix any of the colors that you don't have, like the sap green. You can mix it really easily based on what you have in here. So it's pretty darn neat. I'll go over the unique colors that you don't find in normal sets like this that I am really excited to have. Naples yellow, the chromium yellow hue deep is kind of a neat one that reminds me of the golden yellow, which I talked about in the beginning. Perylene maroon, even though it's a little different than some other brands' perylene maroon, it's a very pretty color. Indigo, of course, is always nice to have, and this indigo is perfectly okay. Translucent turquoise, that's a pretty one. The cobalt turquoise dark is one of the most exciting in my opinion. That's just a beautiful, unique color, and it's fun to have it in a palette. Along with the Venetian red, that one's kind of a unique one for this set. I also really like that they made their tin with that unique design. There's this one and that more browny, ochre color one with the stripes that look just like this, but just different color, of course. I think that is really going to make this set stand out from some of the other tins that you see around, and I think that was really smart marketing on their part. Now, remember, prices are subject to change every single day, but as the day I am putting in this voiceover, you can get this watercolor paint set along with one of their very nice hot press watercolor sketchbooks for $53.99, or this paint set alone without the sketchbook for $49.99, and today there's a 10% off coupon. So a great deal to get the bundle with the sketchbook. So back to this coloring book. I'm just finishing up the last minute details, and when I was done, I did go back and read the instructions on how she suggested to finish this page. And even though I did things out of order of the way she did it, I basically did everything like she suggested. Washing things in, touching paint in, making the leaves interesting by adding in touches of color while they're still wet, and so on. One thing that she did not put in the instructions that I am doing right here is adding a cast shadow. You can obviously see the brightest light is coming from the right side of this, and so I wanted to put shadows. I like to have my paintings grounded, and I think it was a fun addition. I actually really like that. Well, that's a wrap for the Sarah Simons coloring book and the Paul Rubens 5th generation. I actually missed having a white in there. I may have to add one in there. I'm kind of tempted to bring some color down here just to try this translucent turquoise. You know, let's do that. I said we were done, but you know what? We're not. Plus, it'll be a good test of this coloring book paper some more in a little bigger, couldn't talk, little bigger wash of color. Just gonna kind of dash some of that turquoise up in there, and I just really want to see more of that color. Ooh, pretty. That is granulating. That is a PB16. Okay. Just kind of pull some color down. You can see where the paper was dry. Didn't want any on that page. Jeez. Pretty, I like that. Kind of smearing my paint, but I don't mind. Okay, well now we're done. Because of the way I felt that the thicker paint was drying a little bit strangely on here, I went ahead and did a painting on Arches paper with it, and I put it on heavy, just like I did on this edge and this edge of the hat. And it did not dry strangely over on Arches. When I put it on heavy, it did not push the water away like it did on this paper. So it is definitely this paper that caused that. And as I mentioned, I have seen that effect on other paper as well. So it doesn't mean this paper is bad. It's just different than obviously 100% cotton Arches paper. But anyway, it worked really beautifully on here. However, when I was painting this, I was a little bit shocked at how pigmented the paint was. I barely had to touch the well of paint to get a huge load. In fact, I had to swipe some of the paint off in order to get just the right amount. So it is heavily pigmented, this 5th generation paint of Paul Rubens. Very, very fun to work with. That was probably the most fun with Paul Rubens paint that I have had. I also just received in the mail today their pearlescent solid watercolor paint. So this is the one that is the glitter and metallic colors. So we'll play with that later on in the channel. I don't know when, but eventually. Now we're done. I stand by my earlier phrase or earlier opinion that this is the best watercolor paper out of a coloring book I have tried so far. Is definitely not Arches or Bauhong or Meeden, but this is enjoyable. So this is a book that I'd be happy to take on a trip with me and would love to use and just have to play with. Paint is great. Probably will add that white. I love the additions of the more unusual colors. Alright guys, thank you so much for joining me. All the links to these products are always in the description box below if you're interested. It does help me out if you use my links. I really appreciate it, and thank you in advance. I will see you in the next video. Bye for now. I'm not watching. Oh, he left.